Alright, so this is how to make a foliar feed for your plants that will supply phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, iron, potassium, and all sorts of other great shit in a slow-release way. This is a fermented product. You start out with eggshells. You want to collect basically as many as you can, and what I've done is just crush them up like this. Otherwise, they're really just eggshells that were in a bowl. I made some stuff this week with eggs. I made catfish last night, so I have a nice quantity of them in this bowl. This was overflowing until I pretty much did that. You want to break them down into small pieces. It doesn't really matter if they are in tiny pieces or just kind of coarse like that. But basically, the next step, because calcium carbonate can be a little bit difficult to, it's not very soluble. It is, in fact, a very solid mineral. And the best way I find to make it a little more soluble, help break it down, and make it accessible for the plants in a less time-release way. If you take apple cider vinegar, which is mildly acidic because of the acetic acid, you want to get the one with the mother, so-called, organic, unfiltered. Shake it up. I already shook mine. Pour some in. You want enough that you can, sort of evenly distribute it throughout, but not a ton because I'll explain that in a minute. Then I add some shaken aloe vera juice. Usually I like to do the whole leaf and juice the pulp and the liquid and ferment those. But in this case, just easiest to do it from a bottle. It's perfectly fine. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Just make sure you're using the real stuff. Next thing is, in order to add more of the starter culture, like we have in here, there is beer is a very good source of B vitamins. You want to wait, if you're pouring it directly on plants, wait until the alcohol is evaporated. If you're doing this, obviously, this is going to sit for a while and ferment. It really doesn't matter if the alcohol is evaporated. Happens to be that it is. But basically, this will provide more yeast as a starter culture. The reason that you might want to supplement and add a little more yeast to get the job done is that in the United States, beer is pasteurized, and pasteurized beer, in essence, has most of the microorganisms within it, the live yeast, killed. Now, there is a little bit of yeast that remains throughout the fermentation process, after the pasteurization process. But if you've ever had a Guinness in the United States and drank one in Ireland, you'll notice there's a huge difference because they don't pasteurize it. It affects the taste and it affects the number of live organisms in it. So basically, you want to revive these. And the way to do that is give them something to feed on. This is where this next thing comes in. We're going to add coconut water. It really doesn't fucking matter if it's in a can. People will tell you otherwise. Oh no, if it's pasteurized, then the auxins won't exist. That's not true. You have to boil auxins at a relatively high temperature for at least 10 minutes for them to appreciably reduce. But pour a splash of that. You don't want a lot of it. Less is kind of more when it comes to this. And I'll explain what auxins are at the end of this and explain what the whole deal is because I'm being unfortunately a little vague. So just imagine little asterisks next to everything I haven't explained yet. So that'll provide a little bit of sucrose, a little bit of fructose, and more auxins and potassium. Sorry, I'm trying to open molasses with one hand and it is, there we go. Molasses is the next thing. It's high in iron, it is high in potassium, and it will provide some sugar for these cells to feed on. I'd recommend covering this. You don't have to cover it with anything, too heavy. You could use I would use something that can breathe, a towel maybe, because otherwise, basically the calcium carbonate, the carbon molecules can bind to the acetic acid and become carbon dioxide, which will be released in gas form. You want to keep that inside it, but at the same time, you want the yeast cells to be able to breathe. So if you cover it with a nice light towel, that should help. In essence, the auxins that are contained in these, they're compounds that are good for plant growth. Each one serves a different purpose. This would have indole 2 acetic and indole 3 butyric acid. There would be different ones in the aloe, different ones in the coconut water, but they all contain auxins and cytokinins. The thing about auxins and cytokinins is they perform 2 different functions. They will operate on the roots or they will operate on the foliage to increase growth capacity. And when you're doing that, if you overdo it, you can actually stunt it. There is a diminishing returns aspect, which is why I say just add a splash of the coconut water, aloe, and vinegar. If you overdo it, you will actually stunt the growth of whatever is supposed to grow. But without going into too much details, some, such as indole 2 acetic, will help with root formation. Other ones, such as those contained in aloe and coconut water, will help with foliar growth in addition to creating offsets within the foliar development. So if you do this and you leave this for about a day, you can filter out the liquid, add it to about 32 ounces to a gallon of water, spray it on your plants, and your foliar yield will increase substantially. You can then take the dry components, which is pretty much just eggshells that have been degraded a little bit, sprinkle them onto the soil as an amendment. I like to add coffee grounds for a source of phosphate, used coffee grounds, for a source of phosphate. People will tell you, oh, coffee grounds affect the pH. They really don't. Once they're used, they are virtually pH neutral. They're mildly acidic, which is what you're going for. So my recommendation is do this, try mixing it with water, spray it onto your plants, see how it works. If you notice no results, you don't have to do it again. Sprinkle on the remaining eggshells with coffee grounds to help the roots of your plants to develop nice and strongly. And that should help your plants be nice and strong and happy, and I hope it works out for you. Let me know if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, recommendations, etc. Or just hate mail. I'm always receptive to that. So good luck with this.